Welcome. Testing 1, 2, 3. Eileen, you're in the chat room. Mary's in the chat room from Sweden. Welcome back. Haven't seen you for a little while, Mary. Sherry, thank you very much for joining us today. And let me know, everybody, if you can see and hear okay. Susan, welcome. I take it this is your first time in the chat room with us in a live stream. You are very, very welcome to join us as friends here. Let's see who else we have in here. Of course, Doug is here from Diamond Digital Media. I always like to put a plug in for Doug. He keeps our live streams going, keeps the magazine going, does the beautiful artwork for the cover of Entangled magazine. So, Diamond Digital Media for all of your media needs. Let's see who else is joining us. Jonathan, welcome back. Alrighty. Good. Okay, looks like we're all right. My beautiful bride Kathleen is joining us in the chat room today. That's excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover, as always. We never have a lack of things to talk about. Let me turn off my air conditioner. And sort of like the frog in the bowl, we have the heat slowly rising here in the loft. But that's okay. That's okay. Not a problem. Better to have good sound. And what are we going to cover today? Well, I sent you a number of things already through Patreon. So let me go to my notes and I will just quickly scan through my list here. What we're going to do today are pretty much news items, but we're going to get a little technical as well. And we're going to screen through things pretty quickly because there is so much, just so much today. We're going to lead off with Deuteronomy 13. So if you have that available, let me give you a rundown on what we're going to cover. I was kind of joking around. Microsoft has a thing that they do called Patch Tuesday, which regards software patches, fixes for bugs and other hacking intrusions perhaps that have occurred. They have their repair patches. So I was joking around. I'm not much of a comedian, but Patch Tuesday. Okay, well, I guess Microsoft likes my last name. Anyway, we will just touch on that maybe. We're going to, I promised you on Sunday that at the end of the live stream, I would reveal who is considered to be the most powerful person in Silicon Valley. I will do that for the sake of continuity. We will continue from Sunday into a couple of the topics today. We are going to continue a little bit on the topic of Russia. And, you know, we talked about the submarine issue, the 14 sailors, Russian sailors who were killed. We will touch on another article concerning Russia today, and that's their isolation or planned isolation from the internet, what that means. We'll talk about Vice President Pence attending the CUFI, Christians United for Israel conference that took place on Monday and Tuesday, and a list of luminaries who are also in attendance. We'll touch on that, but he's talking about U.S. military gearing up for war against radical Islam. Then we'll move on to, again, for the sake of continuity, we have a book that I cited on Sunday, Jewish Magic Before the Rise of Kabbalah. We have an article concerning the author, Yuval Harari, and some of his prognostications for the future. Even though he is a professor of history, he's talking about the future as a futurist, so we'll touch on that. And he's talking about we're on the verge of merging with machines. So he's sounding very much like a Ray Kurzweil. Then we're going to get into kind of the technical, and that's the quantum random number generator. And that's a mouthful, but I'll break it down, and it's very relevant to what we do every day and the revising of reality that we live in every day. So quantum random number generator, we're going to reach back into the July issue of Entangled magazine and speak a little bit on the philosophical aspects of random number generation. I touched on Aristotle and Plato and related that to the prognostications and philosophies of the Kabbalist rabbis. Again, the whole premise here is that the one world religion that is emerging, that has been in place, really has been in place for centuries, perhaps thousands of years, and I would make the case thousands of years has been in place, the one world religion, superseding all of the known religions, that of Kabbalah. And the operating system of Kabbalah is quantum mechanics, and the software of quantum mechanics, therefore Kabbalah, is the divinatory process known as geomancy. Okay? So we're adding to that body of evidence as to those premises, or premisi, if you may. Okay? And we will move from quantum random number generation to probability distributions. And again, that has to do directly with not only random number generation, but probabilities that we talked about in the May and June, and even in the July issue of Entangled magazine. Why probabilities are such a big thing? Because it's the mechanism of divination, it's the mechanism of quantum mechanics. Okay? And then we have kind of let's just say kind of a fun article, is the notion of firing tiny little spaceships to Alpha Centauri powered by lasers. We'll see if we have time to get to that today. All right? So we'll try to keep it to 2 hours. I'm going to move very quickly through this. But as always, I like to begin with Scripture. Okay? Deuteronomy 13, if you would please go to that. 13:1 I'm going to quote, and then we're going to go through quite a bit on this. If a prophet or one who foretells by dreams appears among you and announces to you a sign or wonder. Okay, that's where we start off in Deuteronomy. So I am going to read something that is, well, let's put it this way. I'm going to go to the Berean Study Bible under the heading of Idolaters to be Put to Death. And I want to precede this. I want to put together just a position statement. I am not advocating the death of anyone. I'm simply reading from Deuteronomy 13. Okay? I'm not advocating that we go out and round people up and kill them. Absolutely not. But I want to read from the Word itself. And this is in the Berean Study Bible, as I said. You can find this at BibleHub.com. And I will read this fairly quickly, but understand from the footnote. Let's precede this. Let's premise this with the footnote from the Berean Study Bible. The Hebrew term refers to giving over things or persons to the Word. To the Lord. Put my glasses on. Let me start up. They're referring to the Hebrew term, okay, destruction. And I'm going to relate that also to death, because death is spelled out here. Killing is spelled out here. So I'm taking this footnote and I'm applying it a little more broadly than they have in terms of destruction and killing. The Hebrew term for that refers to giving over things or persons to the Lord, either by destroying them or by giving them as an offering. Okay? So, bear in mind as I read through these 18 verses from Deuteronomy that we're putting people into the hands of the Lord. We're giving over people to the Lord for him to judge and for him to then carry out his judgment as he prescribes it, not us. So, understanding that, this is Deuteronomy 13, idolaters to be put to death from the Berean Study Bible. If a prophet or dreamer of dreams arises among you and proclaims a sign or wonder to you, and if the sign or wonder he has spoken to you comes about, but he says, let us follow other gods, which you have not known, and let us worship them. Now, I'm going to stop there because I really would like you to understand what I'm citing to you with respect to the broader conversation that Kathleen and I have presented to you, especially on Sunday. Both she and I were getting very passionate about what we were saying regarding the evangelical churches, that they have been infiltrated and given over to other gods, to the Antichrist. I'm going to share with you just a couple of notes from the Christians United for Israel conference that took place on Monday and Tuesday of this week, and we'll get to that. But I would put Kufi, or Kufi, however you would like to pronounce it, into the category of what is being presented here in Deuteronomy 13. I put forth the position statement on Sunday that the evangelical church was set up, was initiated by the Kabbalists, the Talmudic Jews. This is not anti-Semitism. This is talking about those that worship the Antichrist spirit, who don't worship the one and true God as you and I do as Christians. That we've repented of our sins to Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, who we acknowledge as our Savior, who we acknowledge has died through the shedding of his blood on the cross, and equally important, but oftentimes not reminded to congregations, that he arose, he defeated death, he ascended to heaven. The resurrection of Jesus Christ. For without the resurrection, we don't have a gospel. We don't have a salvation. He defeated death, and that's the gift that he has given to us as we have repented of our sins and given our lives over to Jesus Christ. And we worship the one and true only Jesus Christ as the Messiah, and therefore the one and only true God, our Father, the creator of everything. What we're talking about here today are those that have set up a false religion, have misled Christians in the thousands, have misled them into now denying the one and true Jesus Christ, who died for our sins, and to worship a false Messiah. So there's a basic premise here. Understand that what is preached may be 90 to 95% the truth. It may be valid, filled with scriptures that are cited. By the Kabbalists, only the Old Testament. But by the typical evangelical pastor, it would be Old and New Testament. But it doesn't do any good when you then bring in a false doctrine that is 5, 10, or 15% of what is being presented to a congregation. You see, it gets slipped in there. What's happening with the evangelicals is they're being misled into believing that the rabbis have the true information, that the rabbis are the ones who should be teaching Christians. The rabbis who predominantly are Kabbalists that are involved with the evangelical church, primarily Kabbalists. They are leading Christians who now are being told by their pastors, let's welcome into our congregation Rabbi so-and-so, whoever that may be, and we're going to learn from the rabbi. And the mystical, the magical, the mysterious is presented by the rabbi to a congregation who lacks, for the most part, a historical understanding and perspective of what the rabbi is presenting, and the consequences of listening, learning, and following the teachings of the Kabbalist rabbis, because it leads to the denying of the one and true Jesus Christ and the worship of their Mashiach, the return of the Antichrist. And the true Jesus Christ is not brought up, is not cited as who the congregation is being led to worship. So there is a pushback that has started, let's say from Orthodox Christians. I would consider myself to be an Orthodox Christian. Orthodox in that my orthodoxy is based upon my worship and thereby my salvation by the one and true Jesus Christ who died for my sins and was resurrected. That's orthodox in my definition of it. There is a movement, it's small, but there is a movement of Christians who are pushing back against the evangelicals, who are pushing back against the Kabbalist rabbis. Pushing back because we can see that this is leading thousands astray to worship the Antichrist, and they don't know at this point that that is what is occurring. They don't know that they're being led astray because they're dazzled. I call it being dazzled and bamboozled by rabbis who seem to be bringing in this mysticism, which is their whole basis of their orthodoxy, is mysticism and magic, dating back into ancient Egypt. It's Hermeticism. Okay? That's what's being presented to the evangelical church. But the Orthodox Christians that are pushing back, what they don't understand, and we shared this, Kathleen and I did on Sunday, and I'll share with you again. I applaud, I'm fully behind pushing back against the Kabbalist rabbis and the deception of the evangelical Christians. I'm all for that. What I want to add to those Orthodox Christians that are pushing back, what I would like to add to is our 30,000-foot perspective. And that is specifically that the Kabbalist rabbis of old set up the evangelical church. The reason the evangelical church exists is to raise money for Zionist political Israel. Okay? This is for a nation state. This is not about a people. That's why this is not anti-Semitism. This is not directed at Jews. We pray for Jews who don't worship the one and true Messiah, Jesus Christ, as we do. We pray for their conversion to be a true messianic, and we've talked about defining that, challenging that. When a Jew says, I'm a messianic Jew, challenge the messianic. Who is the Jesus Christ that you are claiming to worship? Let's get right down to brass tacks here. So the point I'm making is that the evangelical church was set up by the Kabbalists. The evangelical churches were set up by the Kabbalist rabbis. Okay? So if you're pushing back against this delusion that's being pushed into the evangelical communities and misleading Christians into denying the one and true Jesus Christ. If you really want to understand what's going on, understand that it is a Kabbalist manufactured entity, the evangelical church. And the mission statement, if you will, unbeknownst to the Christian pastors and the congregations, unbeknownst to them, even though they're openly promoting financially supporting Israel, they don't realize that they have been set up as churches to provide that funding. It's not about salvation. It's not about the worship of Jesus Christ. It is about generating money for the Zionist political organization known as Israel. This is not anti-Semitism. You have to focus on the political entity in this discussion. And the political entity has been built and is being promoted and continuing to build out. Look at the Third Temple as an example, as a touch point. And the whole notion of the United States being a Judeo-Christian country. The origins of that Judeo-Christian is from the conversion of Jews to Christianity. The conversion of Jews to Christianity is the origin of that label of Judeo-Christian. Now, today, Judeo-Christian means Israel and the United States have merged together as one nation state. That's effectively what that label means. Judeo-Christian nation means that it is now a Jewish and Christian overall, in the political definition of this, a Zionist organization. The United States and Israel are now one Zionist nation, political nation. And the Christians, you see how they did the 180? The Christians are being converted by the Kabbalist Jews. The Christians are being converted to Judaism by the welcoming into the congregation the teachings of the rabbis, which is all black magic, mysticism, hermeticism, mystery schools. That's all the rabbis are. But they're brought in as rabbi teacher. Well, what are they teaching? The Talmud and the Torah. They're not teaching the one and true Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, which includes the New Testament. But the rabbi will only present the Old Testament. And even that is severely distorted. And that's a topic for another time, another live stream. So, if you are supporting the Orthodox Christians who are pushing against this evangelical movement to financially support Israel blindly, thinking that it's going to bless you and bless the nation of the United States by blessing Israel, go read the footnotes to the Schofield Bible. And we'll do that in another live stream. It's not about blessing Israel and receiving blessings in return. This is about converting Christians to Judaism, the Judeo-Christian nation. You're turning that around from converting Jews to Christianity to converting Christians to Judaism and to a specific form of Judaism, which is Kabbalist. And the Kabbalists worship Lucifer, the false Messiah, which is Mashiach, and the false God, the creator of Ein Sof. That's who the Kabbalists worship. Now, with all of that said, I'm going to take a deep breath and take a pause here, and we're going to go back to Deuteronomy 13. All right. With that foundational statement, let's get into the scripture. If a prophet or dreamer of dreams arises among you and proclaims a sign or wonder to you, And if the sign or wonder he has spoken to you comes about, but he says, let us follow other gods which you have not known, and let us worship them. You must not listen to the words of that prophet or dreamer. For the Lord your God is testing you to find out whether you love him with all your heart and with all your soul. You are to follow the Lord of your God and fear him. Keep his commandments and listen to his voice, serve him and hold him fast. Such a prophet or dreamer must be put to death because he has advocated rebellion against the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of slavery, in order to turn you away from the Lord your God has commanded you to walk. So you must purge the evil from among you. These are the words of Scripture, not my advocating for killing of anyone, but this is putting people who are doing this, that are misleading people to worship other gods other than the one and true God, putting them in the hands, their fate, if you will, in the hands of God for him to deal with. Okay? If your very own brother, this is verse 6, or your son or daughter or the wife you embrace or your closest friend secretly entices you, saying, let us go and worship other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, the gods of the peoples around you, whether near or far, from one end of the earth to the other, you must not yield to him or listen to him. Show him no pity, and do not spare him or shield him. Verse 9, instead you must surely kill him. Your hand must be the first against him to put him to death, and then the hands of all the people. Stone him to death for trying to turn you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Then all Israel will hear and be afraid, and will never again do such a wicked thing among you. Imagine, let me commentary here. Imagine Moses coming down with the tablets and he finds them with the golden calf. Imagine that type of situation. The wickedness, okay? That comes out of Egypt. And the Kabbalah comes out of Egypt. It's steeped in Hermeticism from ancient Egypt. All right. Verse 12, this is the idolatrous cities to be destroyed. If regarding one of the cities the Lord your God has given you to inhabit, you hear it said that wicked men have arisen from among you and led the people of their city astray, saying, let us go and serve other gods which you have not known, then you must inquire, investigate, and interrogate thoroughly. And if it is established with certainty that this abomination has been committed among you, you must surely strike down the inhabitants of that city with the sword. Devote to destruction all its people and livestock. Now, let me insert here. You must inquire, investigate, and interrogate thoroughly. This is what I've said. When someone claims to be a Messianic Jew, interrogate the word Messianic. Question, test the spirit. When the John Hagees of the world, if your neighborhood church pastor claims, speaks to, then question, inquire, investigate, interrogate thoroughly. Be a good Berean. That's why this is taken from the Berean Study Bible. We have said that we are urging one another to think critically. Here it is, same thing. Then you must inquire, investigate, and interrogate thoroughly. We've always advocated being a critical thinker here. Don't be passive. Don't just take in the information the way you've been programmed, whether it's from the television, whether it's from your pastor, whether it's from the leader of the Christians United for Israel, John Hagee, and all these rabbis. Question them. Don't take it passively. Don't fall victim to the passivity programming that we in our reality are always faced with. This is where the answer, again, to the question I pose all the time, for you, for your benefit, what's in it for me? because we all subconsciously react that way. What's in it for you? The answer is, don't be passive, be a critical thinker. Verse 14, then you must inquire, investigate, and interrogate thoroughly. Okay? Verse 16, and you are to gather all its plunder in the middle of the public square and completely burn the city and all its plunder as a whole burnt offering to the Lord your God. The city must remain a mound of ruins forever, never to be rebuilt. 2 more verses. Verse 17, nothing set apart for destruction shall be found in your hands, so that the Lord will turn from his fierce anger, grant you mercy, show you compassion, and multiply you as he swore to your fathers. Because you obey the Lord your God, keeping all his commandments, I am giving you today, doing what is right in the eyes of the Lord your God. Boy, that in the book of Galatians. Let me get back on camera here. The book of Galatians, I urge you, in its entirety, study it, understand it. It is tremendous evidence to use in testimony when faced with the Kabbalists, the Kabbalist teachings within perhaps your own evangelical church or other churches. Study Galatians, okay? So we've got a lot to cover today, but that is our foundation. And because I brought up John Hagee, let me go ahead and address a little bit of news on their conference. Move my notes around here. Okay. All right, here we go. A lot of people here today. I thank you for your time. By the way, programming note, in 30 minutes we will take our first break. But CUFI was going on. Christians United for Israel, founded by John Hagee, now has 7 million members. 7 million members around the world. A force to be reckoned with, a political force, specifically here in the United States, a significant voting body, significant and recognized by President Trump in the fact that he has both rabbis and evangelical leaders who are his spiritual advisors, many of whom you know, not going to list them, many of them are, in fact all of them, from the Christian side are false teachers, like John Hagee, his advisors to the president. And the rabbis, well, the thing that I will divulge about them is obvious. They're Kabbalists, plain and simple. Our own president is a Zionist by his own statements and his own actions, etc., etc., etc. So CUFI, this is a Zionist propaganda campaign, plain and simple. This is a lobbying organization. It is a lobbying organization not only politically, but into the evangelical churches and the broader Christian community itself. And they have led millions astray. So, who was attending besides John Hagee? Well, we had Vice President Mike Pence was speaking. Former Ambassador and now National Security Advisor John Bolton. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Special Envoy to the President to Israel, Jason Greenblatt. And our Ambassador to Israel, Freeman. Okay? These were all the speakers at Christians United for Israel. Now, those powerful speakers, powerful by their position, not their speaking eloquence, they're there because it is a display, let's call it peacock feathers. Let me be a little flippant here. They're displaying their peacock feathers. They're if you want the card metaphor, they're putting all their cards out on the table now, folks. Our political leadership coming right out in public and saying, we, to a man and to a woman, stand for Israel, the Zionist Israel. This is not about the spiritual Israel. It's not the spiritual because they won't talk about the spiritual side. They will only talk about the political side because these are political leaders, these peacock feathers. But underlying it, it is all spiritual because it's Luciferian. It's a Luciferian agenda. The political agenda of Israel is to take over the entire Middle East through war. It is a nation state set up for the purpose of killing, using Noahide laws as their justification, which is born out from the Kabbalists' belief system. They're doing all of this to hasten the return of their Messiah, their Mashiach, who is the Antichrist, plain and simple. Because as it was reflected in Deuteronomy, this is the worship of other gods. This is not about Jesus Christ, whom we worship as our Lord and Savior. Because you will not hear them, rabbis or political leaders, you will not hear them talk about the true Messiah. They will not promote the gospel. This is not about salvation. This is about war, the greater territory and thereby wealth of the resources in the areas conquered, for the establishment of the kingdom of the Antichrist. I keep it simple. Okay? Bottom line, this is an apostasy. This is the great apostasy. This is the great turning away. This is the great delusion. 7 million people and growing in one organization to support the nation state of Israel, and having the ear of the President of the United States. Effectively, the United States and Israel have politically merged as one nation. What about our Constitution? We just celebrated Independence Day on the 4th of July. What about our Declaration of Independence leading to our Constitution and further enhanced by the Bill of Rights? What about all that? What about our vote? What about our voice? What about our say? We the people. Where is it? Okay? Okay, I said we're going to cover a lot today. Let's go on to our next topic. Sunday, I left you with saying that I would present to you who is the most powerful person in Silicon Valley. Now, we are shifting gears, but not entirely stepping out of what we just discussed. What I'm adding to the discussion is more evidence of evil. What's in it for you and me? Again, it is our way of life. I posed the question on Sunday. I posed the question last Wednesday in our live stream, and that question is, have classical computers changed your way of life? Have classical computers altered your way of life? Has our reality been revised by classical computers? And now, by extension, moving forward, are quantum computers, which we will get into a little bit more specifically when we talk about quantum random number generation. Quantum computing already has begun to revise our reality. At the core, at the foundation of why quantum computing really, at the turn of the century, really began to accelerate was because quantum computing finally came into the fold, primarily through D-wave systems. The reason for building quantum computers was to build AI. I said this on Sunday. This is the next thing that I'm revealing to you. The first thing was I revealed to you that, and I'm not a prophet, never claiming to be a prophet. I'm just saying revelations of information, because you've hired myself and Kathleen as your researchers, and now we are doing the reporting that you expect of us. So the revelation in the reporting process that I gave you was the evangelical church was set up by the Kabbalists. Now, number 2 revelation that I shared briefly on Sunday that I'm going to add to right now is this. AI literally spells out the name of fallen angels. The algorithms, I showed this to you on Sunday, the algorithms are identical to the letters that form the names of fallen angels. The algorithms, the circles and the connecting lines, the algorithms of AI. Go Google that, look at it, Google Images. We presented some on Sunday, if you want to go back and watch that live stream. The diagrams of the algorithms of AI are identical to the diagrams, I'm calling them, the letters that spell out the names of fallen angels. Quantum computers were built to advance artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence, comprised of algorithms, spell out the names of fallen angels. Well, what's the big deal of spelling out the names of fallen angels? Well, when you spell out the names and you combine that with the incantations that are used to make contact with the fallen angels, and then communicate interdimensionally by way of those quantum computers in a very rapid fashion because of the quantum computers, you are interdimensionally communicating information to the fallen angels through incantations and receiving back in the form of recipes, instructions as to how to obtain that which you are seeking through that contact. Those answers that you are seeking from the fallen angels, you are specifically naming. There are specific angels, and we'll break this down tomorrow. Specific angels that have domain. Okay, remember the word domain, because I'm going to get to that later. Specific domain, specific dominion over aspects of our reality, our life. That's what's in it for us. This is literally quantum computers advancing at a parabolic rate, artificial intelligence that spells out the name of specific fallen angels, establishes communication, and receives back information and power as to how to influence people and how to modify the physical reality we live in. We've presented all of the preliminary evidence for that argument, both in Entangled magazine for now 25 editions of the magazine and 18 months of live streams. We've presented the preliminary evidence for this argument. Again, quantum computing, advancing artificial intelligence for the purpose of spelling out the names of angels spelled out in the algorithms of the AI, establishing interdimensional communication and two-way form of communication of information. Okay, that's the simple explanation. I'm going to provide some more nuts and bolts to back up that simple explanation as we go. But today, right now, at the moment, the most powerful person in Silicon Valley, you probably have never heard this gentleman's name before. He is South Korean by descent. Billionaire Masayoshi Son. His last name is S-O-N, common in Korean, okay? S-O-N. So his first name, Masayoshi Son, not Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, or Mark Zuckerberg, has the most audacious vision for an AI-powered utopia where machines control how we live. And he's spending hundreds of billions of dollars to realize it. Question that is posed here in Fast Company. This is dated January 14th of this year, and this is authored by Katrina Brooker. She poses the question, are you ready to live in Masa world? Okay, from this article I'm going to extract excerpts. I'm not going to read the whole thing verbatim. It's a bright September morning in San Carlos, California. That's Silicon Valley. And Masayoshi-san, chairman of SoftBank. Now, if you don't know about SoftBank, go look it up. It is very deep. Many tentacles into technology. SoftBank is throwing me off schedule, she says. I'd come, as he said, to meet with the people who's tapped to run the Vision Fund, a $100 billion bet on the future of, well, everything. After almost 4 decades of building SoftBank into a telecom conglomerate, Son, S-O-N, Son, an invertebrate deal maker, launched this unprecedented venture 2 years ago to back startups that he believes are driving a new wave of digital upheaval. He has staked everything on its success, his company, his reputation, his fortune. It says, we both arrived with the same basic question. Where is this massive vehicle heading? But because I wasn't the one footing the 12-figure allowance, I understood that I'd be the one to wait. So, a couple of notes here. Skipping down through here, it says he reportedly paid $117 million for a home in Woodside in 2013, the highest price ever in the U.S. Woodside, again, is in Silicon Valley. It's the more residential end out towards the coast, out towards the Pacific. I grew up in the area, know the area intimately. This glass and concrete building, on the other hand, could be found in any part of suburban America. So we'll move on through this. Okay, finally, Rajiv Misra, CEO of the entity overseeing the Vision Fund. Okay, the Vision Fund is a investment fund. Okay, and that has $100 billion in assets. Vision Fund. Okay, so this is the CEO of that fund, Rajiv Misra. CEO of the entity overseeing the Vision Fund rushes into the room, we jump on through here. Preparing to announce billions of dollars in new investments. $1 billion round to Oyo, the Indian hospitality startup, and it goes on through several other investments here. Son and his partners are in the midst of launching a second $100 billion fund, with plans already underway to raise an additional $45 billion investment from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, the Vision Fund's primary backer. Okay? Now this is interesting, this statement. We often talk about, we reference seeing the bigger picture from 30,000 feet while we're flying on patch air, for those of you that are new today. So listen to this. So what do you want to know? Misra says. clapping his hands loudly. You want the roadmap? I'll start from 10,000 feet. Well, we're at 30,000 feet. We see a much bigger picture than even the CEO, Mr. Misra. Okay? All right. So I sent the link to this article. You can read the rest of it for yourself as a patron. There's a lot in here. There are examples of where the money is being invested, what his intent is to revise reality. But when we talk about, like the title of my third book, Revising Reality, and that's why I keep using that, because reality is being revised, just like classical computers revised our reality. Quantum computing, artificial intelligence, algorithms. Okay? So let me finish on that note. Because we're talking about the most powerful person in Silicon Valley, Masayoshi Son. Okay? Here's the final part of his vision. I want to share this with you and then we'll move on. There's a lot in this article. A lot of things that we have already talked about are reflected in this article. And we've given it to you way ahead of time. Okay? So, tip of the spear information, the leading edge happens right here in these live streams. Trying to get down to my excerpt that I wanted to share with you. He has a 300-year vision. Now, he's South Korean by descent, and you know, typically in the discussions of the philosophy and the societal structure of China, China is often portrayed as having the long vision. Well, here's a South Korean with a 300-year vision. And this is a long article. I'm trying to apologize, trying to find that specific statement. But I think this article, as you read through it, you will see the vision of the other companies that are involved, like Google and Facebook and other Silicon Valley notables, are part of his vision. Okay, they're not separate. So this guy is at the top of the pyramid, if we want to put it in those terms. He's really setting the course with his vision for all, even Google. Oh my goodness. I really apologize. I had seen this and then I had to skip to find something else and now I can't find it coming back. I don't know how many pages this article is in total, but it's very long. So in here it mentions Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos. I mean, these guys all are really working with him, and Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. But his sole focus, as I continue to scan through this, is the advancement of artificial intelligence. Bottom line, where's all the money going? Where are they investing? And I've said this for over a year now. There's two places that money, primarily in the venture capital world, in Silicon Valley, two places the money's primarily going. One is the defeat of death, as I've called it. That's defeating death, that is immortality. That's what they're seeking. In order to achieve that, the second thing that they are investing in is artificial intelligence. the AI to achieve the first goal, which is immortality. You see, that's the offer, that's the age-old, since the Garden of Eden, that's the false promise from Lucifer. You can see their fruits, you can see their goals, you can see their agenda, you can see where the money trail leads. It leads to immortality. Well, that doesn't lead to God. God offers immortality through Jesus Christ, through the salvation of your soul. If they're being sold something other than that, then it, by definition, it is an other God, as in Deuteronomy. The other God can only be Lucifer. Okay? So, you know that they're worshiping Lucifer and not the one and true God by their fruits. And their fruits are seeking immortality by means other than by God through the salvation of Jesus Christ. And that, at the heart of it, is Kabbalah. Okay? Everything traces back into Kabbalah. It's very fascinating. When you have that basic understanding, the historical understanding of how Kabbalah came to be and who's behind it, and then you look at these business articles and you look at technical articles, you can see the Kabbalah jump right off the page. That's why I've said all of the scientific disciplines, all of the technology of today is steered, is guided, the hub of the wheel is quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics was developed by the Kabbalists. Not by the scientists, by the Kabbalists. That's why it is the operating system of the Kabbalist one world religion. Okay. Well, let's move on. I'm unable to find that specific sentence in here, and it's just going to drag us down. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and take our first break. It's the top of the hour. This will give you an opportunity for your personal break, and I'll continue to scan down through here and find the quote that I was looking for. You guys go ahead and take a break. I'll put the music back on for your benefit, and we'll be right back in about 5 minutes. All right, folks, I think we're back. Let me check my audio here. Let me know in the chat room you can still hear me okay. Just turn the music off. All right, sounds like you can see. Okay. Thank you, Aaron Girl, for the email regarding Steve Jobs as a wizard. Thank you for that. I just saw that in the chat room pop up. Steve Jobs spent about 6 months in India with one of the Maharishis there and came back and put together the iPhone. iPhone is from India. It is from the Hindu. Okay? All right. Thank you, Doug. All right, great. We're moving. All righty. I found during the break what I was looking for in the article. And let me turn off my air conditioning. All right. So, going back to our article here, the most powerful man in Silicon Valley, and I'll get to the origins of Silicon Valley in a moment because Sharon in the chat room asked, and I try to be responsive to your questions. So we'll go down that rabbit trail for just a few minutes. But reading from the article, Son says, he has long told people, quote, I have a 300-year plan. And that declaration is not just a fantastic ambition of a billionaire. He has the means to pursue these dreams, and they're starting to become very real. He is one of the few people with the power to make decisions that could have global consequences for the future of technology and society for decades, if not centuries. Let me back that up again. I said, the question, what's in it for me? And I said, the answer is the revising of our reality. Let me read from the article again. He is one of the few people with the power to make decisions that could have global consequences for the future of technology and society for decades, if not centuries. As Facebook and Google have demonstrated, machines take on the attributes of their makers. Algorithms, software, and networks all have biases. And Sun likes to bet on founders who remind him of himself. Talk about hubris, okay? He likes to bet on founders, those are startups, who remind him of himself, or at least share his ideals. Sun's values then will become our own. Say that again. Sun's values then will become our own, dictating the direction of this machine-powered world. Okay? Understanding as you do, this is Luciferian. Interesting, his last name, again, it's a common, it's like John Smith here. Last name of Sun is common in South Korea, but Sun, okay, I'm smiling. All right, one last quote from the article, and we're going to move on. When Sun first detailed his vision during an investor presentation in 2010, slides depicted chips implanted in brains, cloned animals, and a human hand giving a robotic one a Valentine. There were plenty of scoffs. Many see this machine-driven future as frightening or even dystopian. But Sun believes that robots will make us healthier and happier. Underneath, though, lies a more complex story. Computers, Sun believes, will run the planet more intelligently than humans can. Futurist Ray Kurzweil coined the term the singularity to describe the moment when computers take over, and he predicts it will be here by 2040. The Vision Fund could move up this date, and Sun is pouring unprecedented amounts of capital into the people and companies employing artificial intelligence and machine learning to optimize every industry that affects our lives, from real estate to food to transportation. Folks, that's where the answer to the question, what's in it for me? How is this relevant? Is spelled out right here. And we have defined this for you all along, what's relevant. And we've taken it down to that fine point focus of Lucifer being behind this. So that provides me my segue over to answering Sharon's question about the origins of Silicon Valley, and I'll give that to you in just a moment, okay? But understand, when I say that quantum computing was developed and is advanced for the purpose of advancing artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence is there for the purpose of spelling out the names of fallen angels and communicating through incantations and receiving back recipes from fallen angels, how can it be nothing but Luciferian? So his vision, like that of Ray Kurzweil and all these others, is Luciferian. The most powerful person in Silicon Valley, billionaire Masayoshi Son, he's revising reality, and he has the money to do it. Where do you think he got his money? Where do you think the information came from that resulted in his wealth? Everybody talks about, including me, Jeff Bezos being the wealthiest man on the planet in human history, ostensibly surpassing even Solomon in his wealth. Who knows? Suffice it to say, the guy's wealthy. But when have you ever heard anybody talk about Masayoshi Son? Okay? So let's leap over and talk about Silicon Valley. To start with Silicon Valley, we need to start with San Francisco. Silicon Valley, for those of you who are from other parts of the world, may not know exactly where it is, but it is at the south end, the south tip of the San Francisco Bay. So I am going to start with San Francisco. I'm going to start with the United Nations. The United Nations Conference on International Organization, UNCO, commonly known as the San Francisco Conference, was a convention of delegates from 50 allied nations that took place from 25 April 1945, okay, the war had just ended, to 26 June of 1945 in San Francisco, California. At this convention, the delegates reviewed and rewrote the Dumbarton, there's a bridge at the south end of the bay called the Dumbarton Bridge, Dumbarton Oaks Agreement from the previous year. The convention resulted in the creation of the United Nations Charter, which was open for signature on 26 June, the last day of the conference. The conference was held at various locations, primarily the War Memorial Opera House, with the charter being signed on 26 June at the Herbst Theater in the Civic Center, a square that is adjacent to the city's Civic Center called UN Plaza commemorates the conference. Why did they start in San Francisco? Let's look at the landmarks of San Francisco briefly, starting with the Golden Gate Bridge. If you have studied Hermeticism, you know about the Golden Gate and the Silver Gate. If you've looked at the architecture of the temple, the Silver Gate and the Golden Gate, this is spiritual. If you've read my first book, Covert Catastrophe, you know that the Golden Gate Bridge and its center point of its arch of the cable, because it's a suspension bridge, lines up perfectly with Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, the bear. California's state animal is the bear, the golden bear. Okay? UC Berkeley is known as the California Bears, the Cal Bears. Ursa Major is the bear. The bridge lines up with it on the horizon. And if you draw a line from Ursa Major through the center point of the arch of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is hermetic, it lines up with the lighthouse at the tip of Alcatraz, a prison island in the San Francisco Bay. The lighthouse, okay, Light and Lucifer, and continue that straight line, it connects with an obelisk on the campus of UC Berkeley, Sproul Plaza, Sather Gate, another gate. It's a green gate if you look at the photographs. I went to UC Berkeley, know the place intimately. And you have the obelisk, which is known as the Campanile, the bell tower. Bells are used in magic. The bell tower, the Campanile, Sather Gate and Sather Tower. The tip of that obelisk, Roman obelisk, lines up with the lighthouse on Alcatraz, and the line extends through the center arch of the Golden Gate, lining up with the bear, Ursa Major, from UC Berkeley, the Cal Bears, and the final connection point in this long line on the UC Berkeley campus is with the Advanced Light Source Building, ALS, which also, in my history as a paramedic, was known as Advanced Life Support as a paramedic. ALS is also the Advanced Light Source Building for Lucifer of the Synchrotron Particle Accelerator in a circular circle, black magic circle. Circular Synchrotron Particle Accelerator lines up perfectly with everything I just cited. That is by design. Read my book, Covert Catastrophe. UC Berkeley, the synchrotron predated by the bevatron and cyclotrons. Dr. Ernest Lawrence, they, along with Oppenheimer and others, developed the atomic bomb at UC Berkeley. And Oppenheimer's famous quote from the Hindu poem Bhagavad Gita, "I am become death," upon the successful detonation at Trinity. Trinity, not a holy trinity, but the Trinity site named because it's an unholy trinity. Okay, now, lastly, we have Coit Tower. Itself appears as a lighthouse, as an obelisk, was designed by Brown, who was the same architect for the Campanile obelisk on UC Berkeley. He designed Coit Tower. It represents fire, Lucifer. Lastly, we have the pyramid. Adjacent to 111 California Street. Again, all this is in my book. 111 California Street, which is the Masonic Temple. And the pyramid obviously is Masonic, and it's adjacent to the Golden Gate Bridge. It overlooks Alcatraz and the lighthouse. Now, I give you all of those physical symbols because you know symbols are powerful. I give you all those symbols to back up what I'm about to say right now, and that is that San Francisco is purely satanic in its roots. So, why did they choose the United Nations, the signing of the Declaration, the conference for the United Nations in San Francisco? Because it's Luciferian. And what does the United Nations represent? The one world government. When they say peace and safety, sudden destruction, ostensibly United Nations is a peace organization, is it not? It's the one world government. If you look at the symbol of the United Nations, okay? One world government, one world leader. It is Luciferian. That's why they signed it in San Francisco, because San Francisco, at the heart of it, is purely satanic. The Church of Satan was founded there. So they couldn't build out the technological infrastructure in San Francisco because it was already built out. So they went to the South Bay. Essentially, San Francisco and Silicon Valley are all one. Across from San Francisco, across the bay to the east, in the East Bay, is UC Berkeley. The synchrotron, as you look at my cover art in Covert Catastrophe, the synchrotron at Berkeley sits up on the hill and looks out over everything I just described to you by design. So who in the human side set up the Silicon Valley? In short, the intelligence community of the United States government. Look at all that I have published and spoken about as to the origins of Google as one touch point. Came right out of the NSA. Money funneled through the CIA, through DARPA, initially ARPA, then DARPA, now the money laundering organization, as I call it, the National Science Foundation, NSF. That's Google, from the intelligence community. Take the template and apply it to virtually all of the significant tech companies like Facebook, etc., etc. Silicon Valley was formed by the intelligence community. It was founded. They couldn't build it in San Francisco, so they went to the South Bay, which was farmland, swampland, and open fields. There wasn't much there. I grew up in that area, okay? There was plenty of room, and they displaced thousands of people through eminent domain. They took out tracts of suburban homes and farmland, orchards, fields, and built Silicon Valley. because they couldn't build it in San Francisco. By extension, it's all one and the same. Okay? So, that's a little tangent. We went down a little side street, but I hope that answers the question, Sharon. In short, it is the UN and the intelligence communities at work. Okay? Alrighty, let's move on through. Let's talk about Russia. Last week, I gave you my conjecture about the tragic loss of 14 Russian submariners. So let's talk about Russia a little bit. This is from MIT Technology Review. Russia wants to cut itself off from the global internet. Here's what that really means. This is the title. The subtitle. The plan is going to be tricky to pull off, both technically and politically, but the Kremlin has set its sights on self-sufficiency. They sound like preppers, don't they? Wonder what the Russians know. MIT Technology Review dated March 22nd. Okay? I think I sent this to you. You can read it in its entirety if you like. Just go to MIT Technology Review. I think just the concept of them wanting to be separate, they want to have a sovereign internet. They want that control. Okay? So, they're calling it Operation Disconnect. I find that rather interesting because with a one world government, there is not going to be any sovereign nation, much less a sovereign internet going to take place. But I just bring that up as a touch point. It's kind of interesting what it is that the Russians are up to. Let me conjecture again for a moment. If their goal is to isolate Russia in terms of the internet, and we apply the 180 technique to what happened with the Russian submarine, top secret, highly classified at least, but top secret, Losherik was the name of the submarine with the fire. If they were involved in placing surveillance listening devices on undersea cables to tap the internet, because folks, if you don't know it, nearly all internet traffic goes by way of fiber optic subsea on the seabed cables. They don't go by satellite. And I'm not going to share it with you today, but I have found numerous articles dating back at least 10 years about the concern of our intelligence and our military communities in protecting our undersea cables from damage by nature, including sharks, but also by the tapping, not just the cutting, but the tapping of these cables, both copper and fiber optic types, by other nation states, including the Russians. Now, our submarines have been placing listening devices on cables. The Russians have been doing the same thing. That's primarily what the Losherik was designed to do, was to place listening devices. They don't cut cables. There have been a number of people that I've gotten emails from people sending me YouTube videos of people on YouTube saying cutting of the cables. Look, if you cut the cable, it's detected immediately. So that isn't going to be done. From a practical standpoint, you're talking about undersea. Yes, you can use remotely operated vehicles, unmanned submarines, these small, like a drone that you would use in the air, in the skies, underwater drones, ROVs that are used, that are deployed from the submarine. They can go out and cut the cables, but you can't re-splice a cable. It takes sophisticated machinery underwater on the seabed to re-splice cables. I know about this technology. I've read about it extensively. I know what it takes. So they're not going to cut the cables and then re-splice them. So the people on YouTube that are talking about taking a section, cutting it here, and going down another mile or so and cutting it again, don't know about the technology. What is done are placing passive listening devices. They don't even penetrate the armor around the cable. These cables are armored because what typically happens are fishing boats that deploy fishing gear damage the cables. They snag them. Ships will drop anchor near to shore, but drop anchor and damage the cables. So they're armored. Just to penetrate the armor really is not practical. So what our government does, and the Chinese and the Russians do this, and others, and the Israelis do this, are to place by submarine and by ROV listening devices atop the cables, because the cables are buried typically 6 to 10 feet in the seabed material. And most seabed material is very soft, and it's trenched. Cable is laid by the trencher and then covered over again. So they will place listening devices that are passively tapping into even fiber optic. So this, I believe, is what the Losherick was involved in. If Russia, this is the conjecture point, if Russia was trying to cut those cables with the Losherick, in this process of advancing their agenda of isolating themselves from the rest of the world in terms of the internet, that's possibly what the Losherick was involved in. I don't know. Pure speculation. But I know the cables were not being cut because it isn't necessary with passive listening devices. Okay? All right, let's move on. I mentioned to you the Christians United for Israel and that Vice President Pence was there. Article just came through from the Kabbalistic-driven website, absolutely Kabbalistic agenda website, Breaking Israel News. Okay? Vice President Pence at Kufi, U.S. military gearing up for war on radical Islam. Okay? Now, you've heard this verse before from Genesis 12:3, but this is taken from the Israel Bible. And this mirrors the footnote, not scripture, it mirrors the footnote in the Schofield Bible of Genesis 12:3. This is a purposeful distortion of the word by the Kabbalists. The Israel Bible is a Kabbalist version of the Bible, mirroring the Schofield Bible and Schofield's footnote. I will read this. I will bless those who bless you, and curse him that curses you. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Genesis 12:3. Okay? This is directed to Abraham, not Israel. The Zionists are claiming it as their own, and you've heard it thousands of times through the evangelical churches. This is not addressing Israel. It did not exist at the time that this was written. It was addressing Abraham and his descendants, not Israel. Israel, as a political Zionist state, is claiming this and has indoctrinated evangelical Christians to believe that this is the blessing of Israel. The evangelical churches were founded by Kabbalist rabbis, plain and simple. Okay? I'll read a little bit from this article from Breaking Israel News. In his address to the Summit for Christians United for Israel, Kufi, in Washington, D.C. on Monday, Vice President Mike Pence gave a rousing and positive speech describing the unbreakable bond between Israel and the United States. In a marked contrast to the previous administration, Pence issued an unmistakable challenge saying that a newly strengthened military would focus on its primary enemy, radical Islam. Do I sound like Richard Nixon? Radical Islam. There always has to be an enemy. Israel is a war-based economy, a war-based political organization. The Zionist agenda is to take over the entire Middle East and have to make everybody look like the enemy. Radical Islam. Yeah. So this is our leadership here in the United States, folks. Loving Israel, an American tradition. Here we go. Judeo-Christian, okay? Pence was enthusiastically received by what he called the largest pro-Israel grassroots organization in the world. His description of CUFI is accurate, as the organization currently has more than 6 million members, making it, as Pence noted, the largest pro-Israel group in the world, dwarfing all the Zionist Jewish groups combined. There are now arguably more Christians supporting Israel via CUFI than there are Jews in the United States. Let me read that again. There are now arguably more Christians supporting Israel via CUFI than there are Jews in the U.S. Folks, you should save this article. Save it and show it to somebody who's a naysayer. Show it to your fellow evangelical pastor. Show it to your favorite pro-Trump person. Now, I support the office of the president, but I don't have to support the man that's in it. Because Trump is a Zionist. So all those guys running around with Make America Great hats on, show them this article. Noting that the gathering was just a few days after the nation celebrated its independence on the 4th of July, the people of Israel have been at the very heart of the American people. The people of Israel have been at the very heart of the American people, stating that supporting Israel was great American tradition. Do you hear Judeo-Christian in there? Okay? But it's been 180'd. It's not converting Jews to the true Messiah. It is converting Christians to the false Messiah. Okay? Pence referred to President Trump as a man that history has already proven to be the greatest friend of the Jewish people and the state of Israel ever to sit in the Oval Office, a description that earned him a rousing round of applause. Now, let's separate this out. Friend of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. I am not anti-Semitic when I say this. I am a friend of the Jewish people, so long as they worship the one and true Messiah, Jesus Christ, who died on the cross, shed his blood for our salvation, the redemption of our souls, the salvation of our souls, and was resurrected. Then I will call you friend. Okay? Naming the enemy, radical Islam. Okay, so they go through and they beat the war drums here, okay? Trump's support of Israel essential for peace. Remember, when they say peace and safety, sudden destruction comes upon them. Pence went on to detail how this administration supported Israel with military aid by shutting down the PLO office in Washington, that's the Palestinian Liberation Organization office in Washington, and penalizing the Palestinian Authority for supporting terrorism, battling anti-Semitism, and confronting the anti-Israel bias in the United Nations. Okay? So, you can read the balance of this. The U.S. will never negotiate with Hamas. Okay, well, if it's the deal of the century, okay? When you present a deal, when you are going to enter into negotiations, two parties, the best deal is where both parties get something of benefit, that they both walk away feeling like they got what they wanted out of the negotiations and the signed agreement. But here it says the U.S. will never negotiate with Hamas. Okay? So where's the peace in that, folks? It says here, Hamas is a terrorist organization that seeks the destruction of Israel, Pence said. And the United States will never negotiate with terrorist Hamas. Basically, they're just saying they're going to bomb them into oblivion. Now, over the last 2 weeks, Benjamin Netanyahu has said that they will take preemptive action, military action, against the Gaza Strip itself. Okay? Comparing Iran to the Nazis. Calling out Democrats for anti-Semitism. These are the headlines in the article. Democrat Party now support anti-Semitism. The biblical basis for the U.S. pro-Israel policy. In his closing remarks, Pence cited Genesis as the basis for a pro-Israel policy. Okay? That's the Kabbalist version of the blessing that Pence was citing. Quote, and we stand with Israel because we cherish that ancient promise that Americans have always cherished throughout our history, that those who bless her will be blessed, Pence said. Today and every day, the Jewish state of Israel and all the Jewish people bear witness to God's faithfulness as well as their own. God bless you all. May God bless Israel, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. That's the end of his statement, Pence, Vice President. Okay? So when I say that they put 90% of the truth in there through the evangelical organizations and churches and slide in 10% of the lie, there it is right there for you. Draw your own conclusions. Okay? Okay, let's move on. Sunday, I brought up this book that I quoted a little bit about in terms of AI, and the book was The Jewish Magic Before the Rise of Kabbalah. We will be getting into this book a lot more. I mean, it's about, let me see, I think it's about 400 pages, almost 500 pages, so we have a lot we'll cover from this. The author, Yuval Noah Harari. This is from Fast Company, dated yesterday. You can go to fastcompany.com. Humans are on the verge of merging with machines. Since the Industrial Revolutions, humans have manipulated our environment so irresponsibly that we are on the verge of a major climate-related disaster. That's from Elizabeth Segrin, who's the author of this. That's her perspective. At his keynote address at the Fast Company European Innovation Festival at the Gucci Hub in Milan, Harari described a vision of the future where humans and machines become one. That's his vision. Okay. Let me see if I can get his CV here for you. I know he's a professor of history. I'll find it later on in the article, but I know he's a professor of history. So here's a professor of history who's presenting his vision, sounding very much like Google's Ray Kurzweil that I just cited earlier regarding the singularity, as Kurzweil calls it. This is his vision, and that is a future where humans and machines become one. So my question is, why would a professor of history be invited to Milan, Italy, to speak at the Fast Company European Innovation Festival? What are his credentials? Bottom line is, he's a Kabbalist. So what is Fast Company promoting at their European Innovation Festival? The Kabbalist agenda. Again, what's his credentials? He wrote a book called Jewish Magic Before the Rise of Kabbalah. Technology is promoting the Kabbalist agenda, which is the quantum mechanics that runs the world. And quantum mechanics is derived, and we've already given you the preliminary evidence, is derived from the Kabbalah. So they may as well say the Fast Company European Innovation Festival promoting Kabbalah is what they should say. While that seems like the plot of a science fiction movie, Harari says it's a reality. See, there's that word again. It's a reality that is not so far away. What's in it for me? Technology companies from Apple to Facebook to Google have created smartphones and an online reality, there's that word again, an online reality where we already spend most of our time. Now, let's overlay this with something I've extensively published and talked about, and that is the Sentient World Simulation, SWS. Originated out of Purdue University. This is the intelligence communities around the world. I don't care if they're Chinese, Russian, Pakistani, it doesn't matter anymore. The Sentient World Simulation is the reality they are trying to plug us into. Every person on the planet right now is represented as what they describe as a node and is given an avatar in the SWS. This is why 5G and the coming terahertz of 6G has been completely deployed, we are fully immersed in, and is the control mechanism for controlling our consciousness. Okay? Folks, I want to warn you, we're going to go to 3 hours today. At the top of the hour, we're going to take another 5-minute break. We're going to go 3 hours today. Okay? So bear with me. You may have to come back and listen to this later if you can't stay with us. So, twice in one paragraph, the word reality. They are trying to suck you into a augmented reality by directly tapping into not just your brain, but your consciousness. And this is where we're going to go in the 3rd hour. Okay? The article, it's increasingly hard to tell where I end. This is Harari speaking. It is increasingly hard to tell where I end and where the computer begins, Harari says. In the future, it is likely that the smartphone will not be separated from you at all. It may be embedded in your body or brain, constantly scanning your biometric data and your emotions. Think AI, folks. Welcome to post-humanity. If we are able to somehow merge these technologies with the human body through chips in our brains or bodies, Harari says this would be the biggest revolution in all of human history. Throughout our existence as a species, we have always been able to manipulate our environment, create tools that make our lives better. But until now, we haven't been able to manipulate ourselves. Humanity has always remained constant with the same bodies, brains, minds through the Roman Empire, biblical times, and the Stone Age, Harari says. Now, he's speaking from his background as a historian, okay? A professor of history. If we told our ancestors in the Stone Age about our lives today, they would think we are already gods. Okay? Remember the age-old lie, ye shall be as gods. Garden of Eden coming right out in the article here, all Luciferian. But the truth is that even though we have developed more sophisticated tools, we are the same animals. We have the same emotions, the same minds. The coming revolution will change that. It will change not just our tools. It will change the human being itself. You know why? Because Lucifer hates God's creation, which is you and I, and we have been created in the image of God. And Lucifer, quoting from the article, it will change not just our tools, it will change the human being itself. That might as well be me quoting Lucifer. Okay? Harari thinks it is inevitable that we will manipulate humans in profound ways in the years to come. We've already genetically manipulated animals, and technologies like IVF, that's in vitro fertilization, have been able to shape the creation of new human life. And the potential for the human race could be incredible. Right now, natural selection has meant that human beings are perfectly adapted to live on planet Earth alone, not other planets. But Harari says life will be able to break out of planet Earth and no longer be confined to this flying rock. Wow, doesn't that just sound so utopian? Every dictator, every king, every leader throughout human history has always had a vision of utopia and tried to force humanity into that vision. Harari is no different. Not even the toughest bacteria on Earth can survive on Mars, he says. Homo sapiens cannot colonize other planets or galaxies, but a redesigned human body could be made to survive anywhere in the universe. Oh, really? While there are so many potential benefits that would come from merging computers with humans, here it is, folks. They'll always try to put out something that's benevolent. You know, Alzheimer's, cancer, whatever. You know and I know none of it is going to be applied in a benevolent fashion, because how can it when its origins is malevolent? Okay? But he'll say it. Merging humans with computers, Harari also worries that we will misuse our power. Yeah, no kidding. We're in a fallen state. In fact, humans have shown time and again that we don't think carefully enough. Yeah, we don't use critical thinking, do we? Think carefully enough before creating new technologies. Okay, so we go on and he puts out his propaganda. You read the article if you want to see his nonsense, okay? All right, it says Harari is in regular talks with technologists. Really? Why are technologists even listening to a historian? They're not listening to him as a historian. They're listening to him because he's a Kabbalist. And he wrote a book on it, 500 pages promoting the Kabbalah. That's why he's in regular talks with technologists. Because the technologists, as I have said to you in so many live streams now, quantum mechanics, the heart of all technology, was developed by the Kabbalists, who infiltrated in the 1800s the scientific community of the time, infiltrated, step one, indoctrinated, step two, and step three, manipulated, now 3 and almost 4 generations of scientists into the mindset of viewing reality, examining the cosmos, developing technologies from those by way of the vision, the viewpoint, the philosophy, the theology driven by Lucifer, known as the Kabbalah. Plain and simple. So the Kabbalist is teaching. He's in regular talks with technologists. He's continuing the brainwashing. He's continuing step 3, the manipulation. I gave you 2 touch point examples from the Kabbalah, connecting it to quantum mechanics. Very simple example. In quantum mechanics, we have physicists that are known as theoretical physicists. And we have a second group that are known as experimental physicists. Those 2 groups are reflected in the Kabbalah. With the I always back it up. The theoretical is called the theoretical thinker in Kabbalah. The theoretical, the thinking Kabbalist. And the experimental physicist in the Kabbalah is known as the practical Kabbalist. Okay? Very simple to understand. The 2 groups by design are from the Kabbalah. It's not coincidence. This is not conjecture. There's much more I can elaborate on to present to that, but we're going to take a break here in a moment. Okay, so he is in regular talks with technologists. He recently had a discussion in a public forum with Mark Zuckerberg, for instance. He is concerned that many technological experts are more familiar with the technology than the other aspects of the human experiment. Okay? So, he is, in his manipulation, he is putting forth a benevolent discussion by sounding the warning, saying, hey, we need to look at this, as he says here. He urges them to think more holistically about these technologies and how they may be changing humans themselves. For instance, many platforms today, from Facebook to Google, are designed to, quote, capture and hijack human attention, Harari says. Now, we presented that last year in Entangled magazine. This whole capturing the eyeballs and then manipulating by the release of endorphins when people get a like, when they get positive strokes from people on Facebook. There is a release of endorphins, the feel-good drug, within the brain. Thus, people are hooked, literally, on their endorphin releases. Facebook executives who blew the whistle on this, who left Facebook and blew the whistle, and we published all this in the magazine, in Entangled magazine, admitting that in their discussions, they knew that this was going to lead to the hooking of people, literally, just like a drug dealer coming into a new area, a new population, and giving away the drugs of choice for free, hooking people, and then they're perpetual customers. The drug dealer scenario, the drug dealer template, is all over Facebook and social media. Okay? Capture and hijack human attention. This is the basis for their business model, Harari says. It is hard for them to now say this is a bad idea. What will their shareholders think about that? With the best intentions, they are now captivated by the machines they have created. They are trapped. So, let's look at the drug dealer. The drug dealer himself is trapped because he's getting so much money from the sale of the drugs that he's trapped in it because he loves the money and all that it buys and brings him. It's not hard to figure out. Okay? Last paragraph. Ultimately, we have much to lose if we aren't more careful about the technologies we are creating right now. Harari's advice to us is that we shouldn't just invest in artificial intelligence. We should invest equally in understanding and nurturing human consciousness. That is to say, our unique qualities that make us creative, compassionate, and spiritual. Spiritual is the last word. Consciousness is in the same sentence. This is where we're going to take a break and come back to consciousness. This is the target. They're targeting your consciousness, which is our human, and they're targeting the spiritual, which we are, which is our soul. Satan hates God's creation. He wants to kill our souls. He wants to do that by taking captive our consciousness as living, breathing humans. And this man, Harari, saying all these benevolent things, saying that he's trying to steer the technologists into thinking more compassionately, more holistically, is using that as his foot in the door to sell Kabbalah, to continue the infiltration, step 1, indoctrination, step 2, and manipulation, step 3, of those in technology. And he apparently has the ear of the leadership of technology. Why does he have? How does he get his foot in the door? How does a professor of history get an audience with Mark Zuckerberg and others? because they serve the Kabbalist agenda, and Harari is promoting the Kabbalist agenda, and he published a book proving that statement. And right there, I'm going to go and we're going to take a break. Alrighty, we are back for the third hour, and this is where we're going to get into the more technical information. And let me know in the chat room if you can still hear me. Sounds like we're going okay. I thank you for staying with us for an extended live stream this afternoon. I was not planning to go 3 hours, but there's a lot to cover. And I don't mind spending the time. You know, 3 hours, the 2 hours just goes by in a blink for me, so 3 hours is really nothing for me to continue our conversation. And I just thank you for your time. And I know there are many that will have to listen to the third hour later. And that's okay, as long as the information gets out there. But this part is going to be more technical, a little bit of philosophical, as I said in the introduction, where I'm going to make some references to the July issue of Entangled magazine. If you want to have that out in front of you, that's where the philosophical is going to come in. But we're going to delve into quantum number generation, okay, quantum probabilities, utilizing quantum chipsets to do that. And why is that even relevant to you and I? Again, just like the last article, reality, revising it continuously. That's what's going on in the entire world that we operate in. So, all right, let me start this third hour with kind of a bridge. I'd like to use just a little news brief for you that came in today from one of my news feeds. And this is regarding I apologize, I shouldn't have had that air conditioner running there in the background. Let me just read this. Opening keynote, Alphabet Incorporated. For those of you who are not aware, Google changed its name to Alphabet. And I think that that really is just an insult to the general public, calling themselves Alphabet. Because we all have referred to the intelligence communities at large in the United States as the alphabet agencies. CIA, NSA, on down the list. And I already said today, as I have many times, that Google was founded by the intelligence community. So then they just go ahead and call themselves, they might as well just call themselves the intelligence company. Okay? Anyway, opening keynote, Alphabet Incorporated. For the first time, Alphabet Incorporated chairman and hardware luminary John L. Hennessy will give an in-depth keynote on the title, The End of Moore's Law, CPUs as we know them, and the Rise of Domain-Specific Architectures. Now, my job as a researcher and reporter is always to define, to put in context, to distill it down, make it understandable, make it palatable, make it relevant. So, let's break down the title. The End of Moore's Law. Many people are familiar with this. This is the idea that the number of transistors that can be placed on a semiconductor microchip will double in number, in quantity, double every 18 months. Moore's Law basically is every 18 months you can double the number of transistors on a chip. Well, he's saying that that's at an end. I'll explain more of that in a second. CPUs, okay? Those are just computer processing units, central processing units. We have a personal computer in our homes. That's a central processing unit, CPU. It's an old term from when mainframe computers were first put together They had an internal infrastructure, intranet, where you would have various machines that were controlled by a central processor. Okay? Early form of parallel processing, if you will. Now, it was carried over to CPU, central processing unit, or a computer processing unit. And the rise of domain-specific architectures. So let's launch into that for a moment. What is a domain-specific architecture? Domain-specific architecture, or modeling, DSM, is a software engineering methodology for designing and developing systems such as a computer software. It involves systematic use of a domain-specific language to represent the various facets of a system. Domain-specific modeling languages tend to support higher-level abstractions than general-purpose modeling languages, so they require less effort and fewer low-level details to specify a given system. Let me break that down for you very quickly. What they're doing is replacing transistors, okay, because Moore's law is coming to an end, and I'll define that a little more. Because Moore's law is coming to an end, they're shifting over to computer software to replace transistors by being very specific in the area, the domain, very specific targeted area for specific software to address. They're kind of breaking down a big problem into smaller problems, is what it means. But let's focus on the word abstractions, because this is going to take us into our further discussions for the balance of the hour. It says here, domain-specific modeling languages tend to support higher-level abstractions than general-purpose modeling languages. What this boils down to, and I'll get to abstraction and define it, what this boils down to is what I announced over a year ago, is that AI is self-programming. It is self-learning. Ever since over 2 years ago, when I first started talking about AlphaGo, the Chinese board game, and AI defeating the masters, the human masters in AlphaGo, I presented to you that AI, who defeated the human, was self-programming. It was learning from its mistakes. When we talk about recurrent neural networks, RNNs, and GANs, generative adversarial networks, these are systems that are self-learning, self-programming. They are talking in this description of domain-specific algorithms, domain-specific modeling. They're talking about AI stepping in to replace the transistors. AI that is specifically designed for an area, for a task, for a need, for a solution. AI that is specific to a need, that can program itself. And it is the software displacing the hardware. There's another thing that you need to bear in mind in this displacing of hardware. It is the replication of hardware within software itself. Okay? So you have a hard drive. Let me just make it very simple. You have a hard drive and it stores, it takes in and you can retrieve input, output on a hard drive. Well, you can replace the hardware of the hard drive with a software system that, and it is called in the trades, if you will, the emulation of hardware. Software that emulates a hardware function. Okay? This is an extension, this is an advancement of this emulation process, to the extent that you're not only replacing the hardware, you're replacing the actual processing unit, the chip itself, with a software program. And in order to advance that emulation and software process, AI steps in, which is self-learning, self-programming, self-emulating, whatever hardware it deems necessary to accomplish a specific task within a specific domain, domain-specific modeling, DSM. So let's look at the word abstractions in computer science. And what's relevant to you folks is that this is taking our reality and reconfiguring it. So think of the masters, think of the artistic masters that were involved in abstract art, be they statues, objects of art, or paintings, okay? Those artists saw reality differently than the average Joe Bag of Donuts walking down the street with a cup of coffee, okay? They presented their vision of reality as they saw it in their abstraction, in their distillation, in their redefining reality through their art, their expression, their emulation from their mind's software, their emulation as an artist of the reality that they were interfacing with, that they were detecting, that they were measuring, that they were quantifying. And all of that is going to be a little later in this presentation, okay? So abstraction is the revising of reality as the technologists acting as the artistic masters, the sculptors and the painters. You now have the replacement of the sculptor and the painter with the technologist creating their vision of reality, which is an abstraction, okay, and emulating it through software modeling within a domain. Think spiritually about the word domain, because it is a Luciferian world, is it not? In software engineering and computer science, abstraction is defined as the following: the process of removing physical, spatial, or temporal details or attributes in the study of objects or systems in order to focus attention on details of higher importance. It is also very similar in nature to the process of generalization. The creation of abstract concept objects, which are created by mirroring common features or attributes from various non-abstract objects or systems of study. The result is the process of abstraction. Abstraction in general is a fundamental concept to computer science and software development. Now, what I'm sharing with you, I just said, the artist views reality differently. Think about that as I reread that last sentence. The creation of abstract concept objects. Think of a sculptor. Abstract concept objects, which are created by mirroring common features or attributes from various non-abstract objects or systems of study. That means a sculptor looks at, let's say, a tree and decides to sculpt that tree in marble. So the non-abstract object is the tree, reality, and he or she creates an abstract concept of that object, how the artist interprets what he or she is seeing. This is where software driven by AI, driven by quantum computing, this is where the technologists are revising reality. They are deconstructing it and then reconstructing it in an abstraction, which is the revising. They are presenting to us in the sentient world simulation environment an augmented reality, itself an abstraction of God's original design. The singularity of Kurzweil, the merging of man and machine of Harari, the Kabbalist, is this whole thing of abstraction. And I want to come full circle back to where I opened this hour, to the opening keynote of Alphabet Incorporated, the intelligence community, Google. For the first time, Alphabet Incorporated Chairman and hardware luminary John L. Hennessy will give an in-depth keynote on the end of Moore's Law, CPUs as we know them, and the rise of domain-specific architectures. The rise, think about the crazy movie with Schwarzenegger, Terminator, the rise of the machines, right? Why? Understand that words are chosen very carefully when these individuals make public speeches. When they are a keynote speaker, the titles are very carefully chosen. Rise, because people will see, as I just made the leap to Terminator, Rise of the Machines, because we've all been indoctrinated through mass media. The word association is easy. So they use the word rise of, those two words, rise of, because they know the word association that it triggers. Domain-specific architectures. Most people won't even know what that is. I've just described it to you. It is the rise of AI, self-learning, self-programming, deconstructing reality, and creating its version, which is an abstraction, of the original. Creating the mirror image, the counterfeiting process I have just described to you, that we have presented over and over here. Because Lucifer is a liar and a deceiver and not a creator, therefore he can only create the counterfeit, which is not creation at all, but it is a mirroring of that which already exists. And through the distortion of his mirroring results the abstraction of reality. And that is what AI is delivering to the world, delivering to the quantum computer-driven sentient world simulation, in which our augmented reality will be presented to us as we merge man and machine into an abstraction of God's original design. Let's go back to the end of Moore's Law, meaning that it is ending, and the words the end are used just like rise of, word association. The end is used specifically to trigger. These are trigger words, folks. This is all psychological. This is all attacking the mind and ultimately the consciousness. The end of Moore's Law. Well, why is it coming to an end? Because in the world of billions, literally, billions of transistors on a chipset, they are now down at the atom-sized transistor level. Transistors the size of atoms. They cannot go any smaller in classical computing. Classical meaning transistor-based. They cannot reduce the size of the transistors any smaller than an atom. That prescribes the end of Moore's Law. 3 weeks ago, I presented to you an article about the end of Moore's Law and the fact that with the end of Moore's Law, you end classical computing. You end the advancement. Classical computing will continue on at the atom transistor-sized scale on up to larger transistors. Okay? That'll continue. But they are marking the end of the classical age. If you're ending the transistor age, what are you replacing it with? Quantum computers, quantum chipsets, quantum processing units, QPUs, qubit chipsets. What's a qubit? Qubits are quantum bits, hence qubits for short. So the advancement of the technology is what we're discussing here in terms of computing as a large community. Within that large community of computing, we have the subset of classical transistor-based computing. Companies like Intel, companies like NVIDIA, who make graphical, typically in the gaming world, right? Graphics boards, NVIDIA. In order for these companies to continue to reap profits, to advance the technology and reap more profits, and reinvest profits and advance the technology and continue the cycle and make their shareholders happy, they have to keep advancing the chip technology. But now that's come to a stop. So what are companies like NVIDIA, Intel, etc., AMD, what are they going to do? And really, when you talk about transistor-based chipsets, the manufacturing in total, the manufacturing of the actual chipsets is only done by two companies, two locations in the entire world. And they do that for others. It's kind of a private labeling of the chipsets, okay? But that lithography, as it's known in the trades, that lithography cannot advance any further because it's down at the atomic level. So how do these companies survive? That's the big problem. And they've known about this for years. They've seen the endpoint to Moore's Law for 20 years now. So this isn't a new issue that suddenly is confronting them. Where are they going? The rise of domain-specific architectures. They're going to software, emulating the chipset in code, replacing the transistors with code. And who's going to do this replacing? Not humans. Number one, the changeover in the industry must literally be overnight. Humans can't move that fast, but AI can. The shift has to take place. It's not just a paradigm, it's not just a way of thinking, but it is a physical shift in the industry from hardware chipsets to software chipsets. And this has already been in the planning, already been in the implementation for years now. But to put it in sort of relative terms, when they throw the switch, it has to happen overnight. Now, let me share with you something parenthetically, just to kind of shift the tempo a little bit. Let me get a drink of tea here. Okay. Here's the deal. I had a conversation with one of our patrons that is an engineer. I won't say what kind, I won't say his name, won't say where he works, none of that kind of stuff. Just trust me, I had a conversation with an engineer that I have a lot of conversations with. We speak a common language. I asked him to do a search, and I won't reveal the nature of the search because I don't want to give this away. But I asked him to do a specific patent search for me because he has access to that type of database. And he's very adept at it. He can do it much faster than I can, and he was happy to do it. But I gave him a design for a new computer that could use atomic scale transistors. in a specific configuration. Not that I want to promote the B system. Let me emphasize that. This was more of a experimental physicist sort of scenario. Excuse me, not experimental. That's building the hardware. Theoretical. My design does not exist in the databases of the public patents. I do suspect, and he agreed with me, that it has been not patented and therefore kept secret, which most technology is never patented. Therefore, it's never publicly disclosed, and you guys can appreciate that. But at least insofar as the world of patents, my design does not exist, and therefore there is an absolute opportunity. So any venture capitalists that are out there listening to this, I'd be happy to have you sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, if you want to know what my design is. And I'm partnering, if I choose to do this, with this engineer. So I'm not just doing this on my own. I didn't just run off with this idea. I don't really want to build the computer, but my friend agrees with me, and not just to be a friend and be agreeable, but agrees with me pragmatically that this would save the computer industry on the classical side. If I say any more, it'll give it away too much. So I'm just going to say, I find it an interesting thought experiment. And it really would save the classical computing companies if they use this design. And you know, Occam's razor always stipulates that the simplest explanation, the simplest design, if you will, but the simplest explanation is usually the answer, is usually the valid explanation. I have an Occam's razor solution because it's very simple in its design and in its implementation, but it serves the beast, and I don't want to serve the beast. I just share it with you just because we're friends, okay? Let's go on to quantum random number generator. I'll have to move quickly because I have about 25 minutes. I don't want to carry this on too long for you guys. Quantum random generator, and this is coming from a patent, and then we found an article on it, and this is great. This is from a site called Nanalyze, Nanalyze, Nanalyze. What is a quantum random number generator? Now, you guys that have been with me for years, I've been talking about quantum random number generation for years, and it's just like, okay, why are we talking about it again? Well, because it has everything to do with the operating system of quantum mechanics and Kabbalah. It has everything to do with divination, random number generation by geomancy. This is geomancy on steroids, using a quantum computer. And we've shared with you the preliminary evidence, the foundational evidence that at the heart of quantum computing, using qubits instead of transistors, that quantum computers are nothing more than geomantic devices. The software of quantum computing, I don't care what quantum computer is made by who, they all use combinatorial optimization as their programming. That is based on geomancy. Geomancy is random number generation. If you didn't believe me before, I hope you will believe me now, because here's this article. What is a quantum random number generator? QRNG. If you take a programming class that actually makes you sling some code, the article says, you've probably come across the need to generate random numbers for some purpose. Sure, you can use the ran software function, and that will probably work just fine. While software can be used to generate random numbers, incredibly, it can never do so without demonstrating a pattern. You should have alarm bells going off, folks. Incredibly, it can never do so without demonstrating a pattern. There is a very cool statistical test suite called the die-hard tests, which you can use to determine if a number is truly, emphasis is truly random. This is where we're going, folks. The question is the number truly random? That sounds bizarre, but I'll break it down for you. This affects our reality. This is where Aristotle and Plato had their debates. If a number is truly random, you can see output below from a software-generated random number and a quantum random number generator. So if you look at this article, you'll see two different images side by side. You have on the left what appear to be vertical columns that have, it looks, I can see it with the naked eye, that there are patterns. Just the vertical columns that have come about from a software program that generated a random number and then graphically represented. While on the right, it takes a quantum computer and generates a random number, and there's no discernible pattern. So what it means, let me break it down. Let me get back on camera so I can look at myself as I'm screaming at you. What do random numbers have to do with us and how we live our everyday walk of life? Simple example. Encryption of your banking information. So you do online banking, you have a username, you have a password. That is encrypted using RSA coding. And they encrypt it typically 256 to 2048 to 4096, depending on how intensive, how sophisticated the encryption system is. We've talked about encryption before. We've talked about public key and private key encryption. You need a key to encrypt the information, make it secret, and then to decode it, to uncrypt it, decrypt it at the other end so you can read it. Okay? In order to take your banking information or your username and password, wherever it is, and protect that, it is then broken down and placed in a environment in which there's no discernible pattern. We have talked in the last 3 issues of Entangled magazine about patterns. We've talked about using AI to recognize patterns. The simplest example is facial recognition, but this is so far beyond facial recognition and letter and number recognition. Don't even pay attention to that stuff anymore. We're talking about AI discovering patterns in data, producing probabilities, producing models, discoverable patterns that I've called the golden nuggets of patterns that are buried in a plethora of incoming data, making sense of the data coming in from the internet of all things. Otherwise, not being able to see a pattern, it's assumed that it is random, that there's nothing there to see. But if you have an AI software system that is sophisticated enough to recognize a pattern of numbers that a lesser system would just see as chaos, would see it as random numbers, random points of data. A lesser system would not see the patterns and therefore could not discover the message. Couldn't find your username and password. But if you had an AI system driven by quantum computing that could run millions and then billions and then trillions of trial and error, what is often called the hammer approach or the hard approach in cryptography, running possibilities, probabilities so fast, faster than any classical supercomputer could possibly do in thousands of years of iterations of trial and error, doing it at the speed of light, literally, because these are photon-based quantum chipsets. We're not talking about electrons anymore. We are talking about photons, so moving at the speed of light. When they say calculations, they really mean trial and error, iterations, trying the combinations, just like spinning the dial on a safe. Combination after combination. This is how AI won against the human masters in AlphaGo, is before it made its next move on the board, it would try different patterns of moves and then execute. This is how you break down codes. This is how a quantum computer can defeat all RSA coding today. What does it mean to you and me? It means that there is no form of data in the world that cannot be decrypted by a quantum computer. Now, I can be more specific on the computer and the hardware side, but I don't have much time left here today. And most of that you've heard me talk about before. So, we are talking about discovering patterns using quantum computers. The prototypes at D-Wave Systems for their first quantum computers, before they even sold their first commercial model, which was a 128 qubit model, they proved with their prototypes that they could discover the patterns. They could break down Shor's algorithm 2048 and 4096. We've talked about that forever and ever and a day. What I'm saying here is, can you really, and this leads us into philosophy, can you really produce a number that is truly random? Let's call it a pattern of numbers, not just one number. Let's talk about a pattern of numbers, a small group of numbers. Can you actually encrypt a message using a set of numbers that no machine can discover that pattern of numbers? Is that pattern truly random? Is it so random that even a quantum computer could not discover that pattern? Okay? That's the question. I'm going to share with you some notes. I'm just going to read this for the sake of time. This is a response that I sent in an email regarding this article. As I've studied the basics of cryptography since 2010, the biggest problem, barrier, etc. in producing a key, either private or public, for encrypting and then decrypting is literally the production of numbers as entirely devoid of any patterns. In other words, random is not that easy to achieve. These are my own words, okay? This speaks to the issue of entropy. Okay, that's chaos, the state of chaos, entropy. If one lacks the proper measuring devices while viewing, say, the cosmos, it would, meaning the cosmos, it would appear chaotic. Under development of better devices, lo and behold, patterns are discovered. Again, in other words, while aspects of the cosmos, and therefore our reality, may appear to contain randomness, in reality there is no such thing. This delves into the philosophical debates seen in Aristotle and Plato et al. Regarding infinity versus the finite. So, if the universe is infinite, according to Aristotle, That's good news for cryptographers and bad news if it's infinite, which was Plato's position. Infinite equals randomness, at least within man's capabilities, while with God nothing is actually random. Finite equals patterns that need to be found. If not, then they are thereby discoverable, say, by a quantum computer. So let me just paraphrase myself. I'll get back on camera here. If the universe is infinite, because man lacks the ability to develop technology to find the singularity, like CERN, to find the starting point of our universe, of our cosmos, if we can't detect it, if we can't measure it, then we have to therefore assume that it's infinite. If it's infinite, that means you can discover things that are truly random in the cosmos. If you can discover things that are truly random in the cosmos, that means that mathematically, because we use math to describe scientifically the cosmos, to describe reality, we use math. That means mathematically, somewhere in the cosmos, somewhere in the reality, there are truly random patterns of numbers. They just happen. In the infinite model, let's go to the finite model, Plato's position. In a finite mathematical world, there's a limited number of patterns of numbers, limited number of combinations of numbers. If the reality is finite, that means you can, if you develop the technology, if you develop the detectors, if you develop the measuring tools, to the extent, the sophistication, that within that closed finite reality, you can discover patterns. But it takes sophisticated machinery to discover those hidden patterns, those golden nuggets I talked about. Okay? Science today will tell us, meaning the Kabbalists, knowingly or unknowingly that they're Kabbalists, but science tells us that reality is finite. They tell us that they agree with Plato. To back that up, look at CERN, saying that they are searching for the singularity of the universe. If they are saying that there is a starting point to the universe, a starting point to everything, a prima materia, then that means that their model is one that there is a beginning, which by definition means it's finite. So, if science is saying our model of reality is one based on the finite, that means everything within our model is discoverable. We see a lot of randomness. We model it mathematically, and we see mathematical chaos, entropy. But we know, because it's a finite model, that if we produce better and better computers, quantum computers, we can find those hidden patterns. The practical implication to you and I is they can crack any encryption system on the planet. That means that your username and your password, our simple example, is discoverable because it is considered, when it's encrypted, to be a pattern that is not discoverable. That's the assumption, that it's encrypted, it's safe, because no computer can discover the pattern resulting, the mathematical pattern resulting from the encryption of your username and password. But now you bring in quantum computers that can run at the speed of light, trillions of combinations, and they will eventually find, and I say eventually, I'm talking about a matter of seconds to minutes versus thousands of years in the classical domain, they will find that pattern of numbers that represent your username and password. Okay? So quantum random number generation done through software emulation of hardware in the quantum computing world means everything to you and I. Because this is the way through quantum computing that they will disassemble reality, make it abstract in their vision of utopia, and then through augmentation present their new form of reality and connect your mind to that abstract reality that they have created within what I'm calling the sentient world simulation. Okay? They will present that reality in a system that is so highly encrypted, cannot be broken by a classical supercomputer, so highly encrypted that unless you have the specific quantum computer that generated the key, the private key that encrypted the information about you, all of your data, about reality. They want to call it a holographic reality. They want to call it a computer simulation because they're in a finite model of the cosmos, finite model of reality. All of their technology is built on the finite model. They will encrypt everything about you, all of your data, everything, placing it in the blockchain environment. The blockchain is the infrastructure of the sentient world simulation. And it is touted, blockchain, by the promoters as decentralized and unhackable, when in fact, because of quantum computing doing the encryption, quantum computing providing the encryption of blockchain, it is centralized into a central quantum computing system. That unless you have the identical quantum computer that produced the private key, it's unhackable. So it's both decentralized of the records being multiplied, replicated across servers in blockchain, but centralized by way of the encryption of quantum computing. And the centralization, the coding, is by random number generation by the quantum computer itself. So what I'm going to do is bring a patch air in for a landing here very quickly. We're making a fast taxi up to the gate. And I want to leave you with Revelation 9:1. The angel is cast from heaven and is given by God. The angel is cast from heaven and given the key to the bottomless pit, the key to the abyss. Why is it called a key? Because it is encrypted information. It is a private key, private because it's God's key. And it is the manner and mechanism of judgment against those that have turned their face from God and Jesus Christ, who died on the cross, shed his blood for the salvation of our souls, and was resurrected. Those that will be judged by God. His mechanism for that is the opening of the doorway to the abyss. The instructions for opening that doorway are private key encrypted. Satan in his hubris believes that he can circumvent, do an end run around the timing of God, that he can beat God in his timing, that before God cast the angel from heaven with the public key, the private key, before he's given the key to the abyss, which are coded instructions on how to open the doorway, Satan wants to get ahead of God's timing using quantum computers that randomly generate numbers that try, just like AlphaGo, try millions upon millions to trillions upon trillions at the speed of light, processing using photons. Iterations, combinations of the lock. Satan, through quantum computing, driving artificial intelligence, which is self-programming, okay? AI is trying the combinations, trying to discover the private key of God and open the doorway to the abyss ahead of God's timing, to release the armies from the pit ahead of time, to preemptively strike against God and his angels, using the weapons systems that technology has built out, the weaponization program of Satan, to preemptively strike against God and his angels. In his hubris, believing that he can actually kill God and his angels and ascend to the throne in heaven, as Scripture reflects. This is the whole game, folks. I'm showing you the evidence of evil. Quantum computing is malevolent, it is not benevolent. This is why the parabolic increase, as I call it, of artificial intelligence in the Kabbalah, when they are talking about science and technology in the Kabbalah since 1840 in the Industrial Revolution, and the infiltration of the scientific community, the indoctrination and the manipulation, the Kabbalah speaks of accelerating and hastening, those two words, accelerating and hastening, the return of their Mashiach, their Antichrist. Not our Christ, not the true Messiah. Technology is driving ahead, and venture capital is being thrown at AI, and the defeating of death, meaning the DNA modification, at a parabolic rate. Why? Because the Kabbalists want to hasten the return of their Mashiach, plain and simple. And in hastening the return, in bringing in the Antichrist, they are opening up the doorway to the abyss using quantum random number generation to discover the pattern, the hidden pattern, which is the private key of God that has encrypted the secret instructions to open the doorway to the abyss. Now, I briefly mentioned this on Sunday. This is my last point. My third revelation that I shared with you on Sunday that I'm elaborating on today is CERN. In the headquarters building, there are curved panels of glass displaying remnants of papyrus and animal skin writings in ancient Hebrew, Sanskrit, Chinese cuneiform, and Egyptian Hermetic instructions, cuneiform and hieroglyphics from the Egyptians, pieces of which have been translated in the Sefer Harazim, or Harazim, the Book of the Mysteries. This is one of those fragments that's here. Those fragments at CERN, they don't have the complete picture, they don't have the complete instructions, They are fragments, but they're on display, folks, because they are the instructions for the incantations to the fallen angels. To give you a sample. Just give me a couple of minutes, folks. We're almost done. I showed you this on Sunday. Those spell out the names of angels, fallen angels. Those are the algorithms of AI. Look at Boltzmann machine random number generation as one example. Okay? AI, algorithms of AI, self-generating code, spell out the names of fallen angels. Instructions are the incantations. At CERN, they have fragments of those instructions, fragments of those incantations. Incantations that call forth to specific angels. And those aren't even named in this book, okay? It's not written anywhere. But fragments of incantations and the names of specific angels, and there's a hierarchy of 7 in the Kabbalah. 7 realms, 7 domains. There's that name again. 7 domains, the 7th is the heavenly. They are called realms, but domains in the Kabbalah, realms. What they're seeking through these random number generations, yes, is the key. But they have to know the specific names of specific fallen angels that have dominion, that have power over specific physical locations on the planet. It's right in here. It's in many other books on the Kabbalah and the fallen angels. They have to know the specific angels that have control over the doorway to the abyss. This is known. There are 49 keys. The 49th key is actually the first key, and the fallen angels in the literature, in the scholarly published works, on the 49th key, this is what Crowley was after, this is what Dee and Kelly were after, and many others. They were after the first 49th, after the first key, but the fallen angels kept telling them, it is restricted. We can give you the 48 keys, but we can't give you the first, because it's for the end times. It is restricted according to God's timing. The first key is the key to the bottomless pit. Satan is using quantum computing to run at light speed to discover the first key. It's a pattern. It's a pattern of instructions and incantation. A pattern, first the pattern of the name of the angels. So AI is trying all these combinations of different names, random number generation, to discover the names of the angels that have control of the doorway to the bottomless pit. They have fragments of those incantations, a starting point at CERN. This has been the basis at CERN for their seeking of the singularity, which is their cover story, but revealed in 2009 by Sergio Bertolini, who was the head of computing at that time at CERN, who said, we are going to open an interdimensional doorway, we're going to send something through, but we're not sure what's going to come back. That is the opening of the doorway to the abyss, and CERN is physically located at the ancient Roman temple site to Apollyon, Abaddon the destroyer. It is situated over the doorway, as they believed in the Roman times, in the Greek times, in the Mesopotamian times, as the Talmudists believe, as the ancient Egyptians predating the Talmudists believed, was the doorway to the abyss. So what does quantum random number generation, encryption, all of this stuff, photons of qubits, the end of the classical Moore's law, atomic scale transistors, what does all this mean? It means that literally Satan has put his minions, humans and fallen angels, on the pathway to hell, which is broad, it's wide, lots of people are involved in it, lots of venture capital, very broad path leading straight to hell. Reflected in the Kabbalah as accelerating and hastening the return of the Antichrist. That's why all the money and all the people and all the brain power is being thrown at this, to accelerate it and continue to accelerate, continue to push this agenda. Because Satan is trying to get around God's timing, to do the end run, to do a preemptive strike by opening prematurely the doorway to the abyss and kill God's angels and God himself. Such is the hubris of Satan. With that, I will end. Thank you for spending 3 hours with me today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your prayers. And God willing, Lord willing, the true Messiah, Jesus Christ, we will be back tomorrow with a whole lot more. There's so much more to say. Believe me, I've got stacks of books here. We haven't even gotten halfway through presenting what we've read, Kathleen and myself. God bless you. Read Galatians. Read Galatians. And read Deuteronomy. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.